This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic region. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 207 of the GardenDC podcast. In this episode, we talk with Helen Yost, author of Beginner's Guide to Garden Planning and Design, about taking simple steps to create good garden design. The plant profile is on Mandevilla, and we share what's going on in the garden, as well as some upcoming local gardening events and this week's garden tasks in the What's New segment. We close out with the last word on love, land, and wisteria from Christy Page of Green Prints. This episode, we're joined by Helen Yost. She is an outdoor enthusiast, garden stylist, and writer. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you, Kathy.
So we're going to be talking all about your new book, The Beginner's Guide to Garden Planning and Design. But before we dive into all of that, Helen, we like to ask our guests of the GardenDC podcast, were they born with chlorophyll in their vein and a green thumb?
I'm not sure I was. I probably made every mistake in the world, but I started through nature. So being outdoors, I grew up in a unique place in Norfolk, Virginia. We had a field across the street from us that was filled with cattails all the way. I mean, acres and acres of cattails. And then that led to a creek that was part of Chesapeake Bay where it dumped into the ocean. So we were more after tadpoles and butterflies and spiders and that sort of thing. So that really got me mostly interested in gardening because I wanted to build a place for these critters to come, and that's where I am today. I have diverted from this, thinking I wanted the latest and the greatest plants. I wish I could have those years back. I really just want something that's important for the wildlife.
Interesting. And I love that you describe it as a place for the critters to come.
Yes.
And that's a great way to describe a garden.
Yeah.
So did you go to school for horticulture, or what was your career path?
I went the environmental path. So I have a master's in environmental science. A BS in environmental science and a master's in environmental engineering. So I always knew I was going to work in the environment field, and gardening, that's truly what it is. So I'm actually a retired air pollution engineer. Spent 25 years doing that. And then we adopted children when I was 40, my first child at 40, and the last at 44. And I decided I was going to hang my shingle and do garden maintenance. That's what I did for 15 years. And then I decided I wanted to get into writing, and been doing that ever since, and styling gardens, because and the book will lend itself to that. A garden can have a style, and each person can have a personality that they're putting in their garden that makes it unique. And that's one of the things I love.
And before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about your home garden, Helen. So you grew up in the Chesapeake community around there. Yes. And now you're in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is a tremendous gardening area. And we've had some past guests from there. So maybe describe a little bit about the growing climate and also what you grow personally.
Okay. Well, we are supposedly zone 8. We just had a map change from 7B. We're pretty similar to y'all, I'm sure, but I'm not quite sure we're at 8 yet, but we'll see. I'm trying some things. I tend to like to buy plants that I can wrap a zone around, not push microclimates or limits or kill it 3 times and before you can really grow a plant. I don't believe in any of that. I just want to be able to grow a good plant. And I have clay soil, obviously, and a half acre. I'm on a half acre in a kind of a she neighborhood. So I am either loved or I'm hated, but I try to do my best to make it presentable. I really believe that you can put formal elements in your garden and then have the wildness next to it. And then that way, when the wildness goes back, like herbaceous plants are going to go back, then you still have that formality year round. So you really can make the garden look good with some formality plus the wild plants.
And so you're growing mainly for wildlife, or do you have a edible garden for your family?
I do indeed. But more importantly, I grow a lot of fruits. So that's also for the wildlife. But I have over 30 different fruits that I grow. And mostly, like I'm looking out the window now at a pomegranate. It's it's got a lot of berries on it for the fall, and I love that plant. Does really well here. We have blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, pears, two different kinds of pears. I've just harvested Bartlett pears. We have pawpaws. We grow garlic, herbs, lettuce for the chickens. So yeah, we got a cherry tree that's been there 15 years and hasn't given me a cherry yet. It's a Stella, so it should be self-pollinating. And I, as best I can, I don't spray. So they've got to be a hardy plant. And if I can get a self-pollinator, that's what I do. Because I'm not starting a farmer's market or anything. I just need enough for my family. And I already got more than enough for my family. So one pear tree can take care of us for a year.
Yeah, pears are a little bit difficult without spraying, so I admire that you're getting some edible fruit out of that.
Well, what's interesting about the Bartlett, because you know, obviously a European one, and the skin is thicker on that, and so you don't get as much penetration from insects.
Great tip. So let's talk now a little bit about some of the other books you've written before we go on to your new book. So you had Plants with Benefits.
Yep.
And that one was a fun one that was basically plants that have aphrodisiac or other types of influences on humans.
Yes, I did. It was featured in the New York Times when the Times still featured garden stuff and food. They don't do food anymore, I understand. But anyway, that was a nice reward. It was just interesting that some foods just really make you think. The banana is the perfect example. How many kids have you had over your house? Maybe not your house, but mine, where they take a banana and they do things with it that I go, okay. And then I'm blushing and I'm saying, y'all have fun, you know, make fun with a banana. We know what you're doing. But it is considered an aphrodisiac because of its shape. Mostly, we found that the foods that were aphrodisiacs had a lot of zinc in it. So, you know, you can take a pill for that.
Interesting.
I was just thinking there was so many laurel, so many funny stories in history that people believed in the powers of an aphrodisiac. Cleopatra, believe it or not, the saffron is an aphrodisiac because it looks like a little sperm. And she would bathe in a pound of that. Can you imagine how many?
Wow.
Yeah, what color your skin came afterwards? Whenever she had a tryst with Mark Antony or Julius Caesar.
Well, it's kind of like a self-tanner, if you think
Yeah,
about
I am. You can afford
bathing in saffron. Yeah, I guess you would be kind of glowing and, yeah, fresh self-tanner, but that very decadent for a bath full of it.
Yeah, but you know, Cleopatra, she could get away with it.
Any other favorite stories or facts from that book?
Well, gosh, it's very fascinating. I don't have a copy in front of me to spark my memory, but coffee is one of them because coffee is an aphrodisiac. But it was first found by a goat herder. Now, I think it was Afghanistan. I can't remember, but it was a goat herder, and his goats were eating a coffee plant, and he noticed how frisky it was.
That might be Ethiopia.
Maybe it was Ethiopia.
Yeah, because that's where some of my Ethiopian neighbors have told me a similar story about, that's the origin of coffee.
Yeah,
Is their country. They're very proud of that.
they should be, because I
Hmm.
drink 2 cups every day. Anyway, so it's just so funny that he saw this, witnessed it, and it does. A lot of the other aphrodisiacs are a warming agent. Like wine is a warming agent. Too much and you're out of the ball game. But a
Hmm.
glass of wine just makes the whole body feel warm, and that is also considered an aphrodisiac because of that. Garlic,
Interesting.
garlic
Hmm.
is a aphrodisiac, but it's called it's called the stinking rose. And Tibetan monks were forbidden to eat it because it's that warming agent. It causes that arousal. But you both have to eat it kind of at the same time because otherwise it's disgusting.
Yes. Yeah. A life without garlic, I feel bad for them.
Yeah, they sacrifice a lot, so
Yeah.
it's one of many things, I'm sure.
Hmm. And then your other book, Good Berry, Bad Berry. So
Yes,
that's a fun one.
that was a fun one because a lot of people, it was not really about foraging, but it's about looking at a plant and, want to know if it's edible before you can put it in your mouth. I did it actually in 3 chapters. Good berry meaning it is edible. Bad berry means it's poisonous. And then I also did a good berry, bad idea section. And that
Mm.
was a plant like, I know the yew tree. So the yew seed, it has the red arrow around
Hmm.
it. That is edible. But the seed, 2 to 3 seeds will kill you in 2 to 3 hours with no symptoms.
Wow.
That's how poisonous it is. And so really, and I have eaten the arrow and it's nice. You really need to know what you're doing. I
Hmm.
don't recommend it. And you're not going to fill up on those little things anyway. So just ignore that one. And the mayapple is the same. It's only edible if it's ripe. If it's not ripe, it's not good for you.
Yeah, and there's so many of those plants that it's either not palatable, at a certain stage, and you have to wait until it gets to that exact stage. I'm thinking of
Yeah,
our native persimmon as one of them, and or the plant is entirely toxic or poisonous, in which case you don't want to eat any part of it except for this one tiny little part, like you described with the yew seed.
yeah,
But the rest of it shouldn't be touched, so you have to be so careful.
exactly. Well, Hugh Gibbons always said you can eat pine cones, but that doesn't mean it's going to taste good.
Exactly. I always ask about edible versus palatable because I'm like, sure, you can eat it. I mean, I could eat a blade of grass, if you're walking along a park or somewhere and see it, but do you want to? Probably not.
Yeah, one taste and you'll know you don't want to do it again.
Yeah. Or you'll see other people stepping on it or whatever else reason not to eat it. Or dogs too.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's talk about your new book. And the beginner's guide is in the title. So Beginner's Guide to Garden Planning and Design. But before we started recording, we were talking about the fact that I think this book is useful for gardeners of all levels, beginner or not.
I thank you. I agree, and other people who have written in have agreed with that. Uh, it's not because it's not a how-to. It's really more of a where to, why to. Like I want to put up an arbor, say. What considerations do I want to think about in placing that arbor? So, if you ask 10 gardeners a gardening question, you'll get 12 answers. But when it comes to style, it's sort of like the pornography. I can't describe it, but I know I want to see it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a funny concept that there's thought processes, and not everybody really understands that there's a need for that thought process. do we want it a transition area, or are we blocking off our garden, making it into sections, and where is that transition going to go? How is it going to take me? What kind of path am I taking to get to it? What's going to be beyond it? And so I kind of go through these elements of thinking about how I would place it.
I think that's so important, Helen, and makes the book so useful because a lot of us gardeners, we're just collecting plants and sticking them in the ground. Yeah, right. And we're just like, wherever it'll survive is a good place for it, not necessarily where it looks its best.
Well, and then you'll see I have a chapter on water-wise design, and I'm a huge proponent of that as part of my sustainability garden. My garden is, well, I guess that's all the environmental background I have. I just kind of geeked out a little bit. It's very much a sustainable garden. I have all of my beds in zones. So I really can, what it allows me to do, it had a map in my head, whether it's an oasis zone, and that zone is the one that's closest to a water source. So it's typically near the house, and you don't have to drag a hose. So I have some containers that I do that are right off my porch. And then the next zone is a transitional zone, which is halfway between the water source and the perimeter of the property. And I had very good success this year. We had a drought for about 6 weeks, and I was just getting ready to water it the next day, and we got a good rain. So really don't water. I don't irrigate. I think most people overwater anyway, honestly. But new plantings always need to be watered for getting established. And then there's the xeric zone, which is the perimeter of the property. And it's the furthest from a water source, but I don't water any at all unless I have some new plantings. So I don't drag a hose, and I used to say, oh, I want this plant. I'm going to put it here. Yeah, I'll take care of it. I know it needs shade, but if I give it sun and a lot of water, maybe it'll be all right. And that's exhausting, It really is. Just plant it where it's like plants together, water conditions, sun conditions. Kathy, there are just so many plants out there. There really is. You probably see more in catalogs than you do in the average garden center, but if you really are looking for something specific, Google it, find out who sells it, or go to your garden center and see if they'll order it for you. And most will order in plants for you.
So when we're talking beginning garden design, or could be an experienced gardener with a new garden that they're establishing, or maybe wanting to redo an old garden, what are those first steps that they should be taking?
I would photograph my garden. You would not believe all the uglies that show up in a photograph that you have blocked out every day. Your mind says, okay, I'm just going to ignore that. Mm-hmm. So I would photograph and just see where you are, just to see if you even need improvement or what the improvement might be. I also believe in the blue blue spray paint. If you want to figure out where to put in a new bed, line it out with blue paint. You just brush this off. It's not permanent, but it allows you to see the space that you might create. Elements are just really make a garden sing in my mind. So I describe it in the introduction, musical instruments within the orchestra, and one element isn't necessarily going to make your garden sing, but all the elements together really is what pulls a garden and what makes it.
I think that's a really great analogy to have a garden be a symphony of all these different elements coming together, because you don't want just maybe a bed after bed of just daylilies. You want something else in there, maybe a tree, maybe a shrub, some contrast, some other textures in there.
Yeah. Well, I spent years as a stylist and writer, producer with Meredith Corporation, Better Homes and Gardens and country gardens, traditional homes. And what makes them something we want to go to is that they have added elements that just all work together. It's sort of like Coco Chanel. She says, get dressed and then take one thing off before you go out. We tend to overdo things. Now, I know a lot of great quirky gardeners that people give her concrete bunnies, and they have probably thousands of them on a 2-acre lot, and it's cute because it's her, and it's not for everybody. I personally would, instead of spending $25 on a concrete bunny, and then another $75 on some other concrete thing, I go to art shows, garden art shows, and flea markets, and I'd rather get one thing for $100 and make it really work in the garden instead of having it cluttered.
Mm-hmm. And I know that your experience with doing some of those garden, I guess not tours, but research for the Garden Conservancy and setting up the tours for them, and also for the magazines, scouting them out. And you were been exposed to hundreds of gardens. And when you visit them, what is that you see that you're like, yes, this is a well-designed garden? What are the indicators to you?
Well, I have 50 of them in my book. You can have a look. All 50 are addressed somehow. Whether they're, gardeners say, oh, I'm too busy to sit down. But you know what? Even if you don't use a bench in your garden, you're seeing it. It adds beauty. But we all should take some time to sit down and enjoy our garden. It's a labor of love, but we might as well enjoy it too. They might have a pond or a waterfall. I can't think of the word.
Like a
water feature that's with running water. I'm telling you, I think 9 times out of 10, they just put it there and it doesn't look natural. And so the ones that are in the magazine, they have a very, very natural backdrop to them so that it looks like it belongs there instead of up against the side of the house or whatever, just to have the water feature. It's not enough to just have it. It's where you're putting it, how you're placing it, how you're using it, what's the intention. So that's kind of what I look for. Some people will go, look, my garden looks just like this in the magazine. Can we get it photographed? And I say, well, it's already been done. You come back in a couple, 3 years, but that's the thing is they're looking for uniqueness. Your own personal style is real important. So copying something out of the magazine is always fun, but doing it to the point where it actually reflects who you are instead of whoever it is you're copying. You can really I tell this story about Mr. Dale. He lived I lived in a historic district in Raleigh for many years, and it was one of the Victorian houses that had been split half and half as a duplex. The owner owned the whole house. She split it. Anyway, her roommate or her tenant was Mr. Dale. I don't know if that was his first name or his last name. I just knew him as Mr. Dale. And I would admire that garden every time I went to work. It just sung. Everything was placed perfectly. Well, lo and behold, she and her husband decided they want to have a family. So Mr. Dale had to find new digs while they converted their house to a single-family home. One day, I drove by and I thought, what happened? The plants were there. The stepping stones were gone. The bird feeders were gone. The arbor was gone. They had a ceramic bunny. It was like, that's what made that garden sing, not the plants alone. But the elements of a garden, yeah. So you can always tell. Often we'll drive down and I will admire the way somebody had benches on their front porch or whatever, and then they sell the house and the magic is gone, and it's only because the benches are gone. Or I've been driving by and there's a house that the architectural feature doesn't match the house, and it just doesn't work. I mean, I'm sure they love it. I'm never going to post anything bad on Facebook, but I don't understand. They did what they like, but you've got to also consider what you're working with.
Mm-hmm. And I think that brings us to one of the big points in your book, which is applying scale and balance to your garden beds. And how do you do that? Like, if you don't have that eye, or how do you develop that eye for balance and scale?
That's a really good question. I have a big lot, and I have some big plants on it, on my lot. And I don't like little plants. I used to do garden maintenance for a friend of mine in Oakwood, the historic district in downtown Raleigh. And she had a 2-acre lot. It was huge. And she had these little tiny plants, not I can't remember what it's called. It's a type of liriope, but not.
Like mondo
Little,
grass or
yeah,
dwarf mondo
yeah,
grass?
even smaller and not as thick, the little silver one.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so lost in the garden. So she would have a bed, and in the back there would be a fence, and all there was were these little tiny plants in the front, where there was no creation of a front, a middle, see-through plants, something growing on the back, kind of putting in some layers for that garden. So that's what I was there to help her for, and that's what we did. But sometimes it's not just what you like; it's just where can you use it. So that would require that little silver liriope type plant would do much better in a much more petite location, like maybe at the base of a bird bath or a feeder or something like that.
And then you're talking about layering a little bit there,
Mm-hmm.
and how we can add that to the garden. So can you describe some of those basic layers?
Yes, I can. And I think I kind of just did, is that I can look out at my mixed border, and I'm a big fan of mixed borders, by the way. I've been honing mine in over the years so that it has something beautiful year round, not just beautiful perennials, but shrubs and small trees and that sort of thing. You're looking at the height, you're looking at color, you're looking at the seasons that a plant is growing. And that's the other thing. If you vacation every summer to Maine, why would you want to put in plants that you can't enjoy because you're not around to see them? So
Mm-hmm.
you would be more likely to put in some trees and shrubs that are highlighted in the fall, winter, and spring. So it really depends on your intention. I love a backdrop of a fence. I happen, because I am a sustainable gardener, and I got lucky once. A friend of mine was helping another friend sell an old tobacco barn, and they were getting rid of the tobacco sticks. And there's a picture of it in the book. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with them for the longest time. I had about 600 of them. So I stained them because I didn't want them to weather. And I made panels on the chain link fence that's behind me, separating the properties. And I just made these panels and just zip tied them on the back. And that's a layer in it of itself that I leave exposed mostly because it's beautiful. And then in front of it, I'll have waxing and waning perennials and shrubs and deciduous trees, some beautiful Japanese maples. I like the big leaf ones. I like pumpkin, and so a color. And my color theory is a box of crayons, so it's not going to be a garden that you would think, okay, so I don't design beautifully like, okay, well, this color pink isn't quite right next to that pink. So if it's pink, it's good enough for me.
So it does bring us to focal points in the garden. So when you're
Yes.
creating those layers, how do you know where to put the focal points?
That is actually very easy when you think about it. If you were ever a hiker, right? You would look at the yellow tag or whatever tag it is for the path, right? And you always have to see the next one, right? So you see one, and then you're supposed to be able to see the next one beyond it. not like littered. It's such that you're walking to one and you can see where you're going next. That's how you want to lay out your garden art focal points. In my case, I have a lot of garden art. Well, what we do is it's never a standalone, very rarely, unless you have some kind of really high-end sculpture garden, but you tuck them into the garden, that they are a companion to my pomegranate, for example. I have a very beautiful piece by Tinka Jordy, and she's called Moving Forward. Tinka does a lot of androgynous type women, mostly women, and it is nestled underneath. You don't see it right away when you walk around the garden. Then you see this little vignette as opposed to it sitting on a pedestal. I like the subtlety of discovery in a garden, both with plants and the elements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always love that garden surprise, maybe coming around a corner or turning around. Sometimes you walk through a garden one direction and you miss things. You have to walk back up the path and turn around sometimes to see everything.
That is exactly right. And I do it here. I've been renovating mine. I'm having an open garden if anyone's coming down from Maryland or DC, October 5th. But I've been trying to streamline my garden more because you're always changing. Otherwise, it's just a landscape, right? It's like you get a set number of bushes and trees and grass. A garden is alive, and you're trialing and error, and plants are going to die. It's not necessarily your fault. What you really want to do is find the plants that you love and research it. Reading magazines like Washington Gardener and the latest plants, and reading the books that are out, and learning the how to live in a garden. It's not supposed to be static.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, because they're busy or just don't understand gardening, think of it as just it's installed and then it's done.
Yeah, exactly.
And most gardeners know it's never done. There's no such thing.
Well, we don't want it to be done, do we, Kathy?
Mm-mm.
No.
And everything is changing with every season and in 4 dimensions with time. So that would just be an impossibility.
Yes. But who would want that anyway?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in my family room, I never move the furniture. It's set. It's fine. Good. I'm good to go. That's not the same in a garden.
Mm-hmm. That's a great comparison because I think some people might want an all hardscape garden where it is just like a set living room interior decorating type of thing.
Right.
But when we're talking about living things, that's just not going to be possible.
No. And then those living things are bringing in more living things. And honestly, Kathy, I think a goldfinch eating a Rudbeckia seed on my black-eyed Susans is probably just as pretty or not prettier than the flower itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always so much fun to watch a butterfly come in, what flower it chooses, and then flits off. Yeah. And you're like, oh, but you didn't see these over here. Come back.
Yeah. And you can be entertained for hours that way, and that's why you have to sit in the garden and enjoy it.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of their lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and Bookshop.org.
Talk a little bit about color and fragrance in the garden from your book. And I know you had talked about color a little earlier and that you believe in the whole crayon box being used. But how does one add color and fragrance if they're maybe a more heavy into shrubs or trees gardener, or maybe it's through bulbs or the ephemeral plants or containers that they're adding those in?
Right. Well, I mean, I guess the biggest difference, I have a hot garden, so that's why I'm a box of crayons, and I don't have a lot of pastels. So, I want reds and pinks and even whites. But if you don't have the intense sun that I have, you would put in like lamb's ear and plants that are more silvery and white and that does need to be kind of the same. But I have a hot garden, so I can do anything I want in my hot garden. But if you have a pastel garden, you really want to keep it in the same kind of element. As far as fragrance is concerned, put it where you're going to be. Like I have Edgeworthia off my back porch that gives me the winter smell, the smell in the winter. And then the shrubs, the berries, of course, you're doing that for the birds anyway. So a lot of the yaupons, I have a beautiful a weeping yaupon. Boy, they really do get big. I got hit by a storm once and took out one of the limbs, and that was a good thing. But then you get to watch the cedar waxwings come in and just devastate the plant, and I love that, because we provided food for them. And then I mentioned like my pomegranate at Christmas time when we don't harvest every one of them, it looks like ornaments on the tree.
Nice. And I was reading in a section in your book on time. So we were talking about the fourth dimension of time in the garden. Mm-hmm. And one of your sidebars was called Splurge Where It Counts. And so I thought you were going to talk about buy one really expensive container or something like that. But you actually are talking about buying larger plants to start off with. Can you explain that?
It really depends on your budget, obviously, and how old you are, how long you're going to be living in a house. So if you have a starter house and you're both working, you're going to be leaving in 7-10 years, you don't really want to plant an oak. Because you'll never, always plant an oak is a good idea, but you would never really see it to its fruition. So you want to plant something that is going to be sizable, and it won't be an oak. That was not a good example, but more like a dogwood. Say you're going to put a dogwood in. You don't want a little puny stick. You can, obviously, but by the time it's looking really good, you're moving on to somewhere else. And so invest in the tree that you can enjoy for the time you're going to be there. Now, I'm a senior citizen, so I like to plant big because, I may not have tomorrow, but I hope I do.
Yeah, and that's so true about getting a mature look or a more full look almost immediately. Mm-hmm. Starting off with 1 gallon or larger, 3, 5, up to maybe even a 10-gallon plant, rather than buying like this little small pint or quart size.
Exactly. And, if that's all your budget allows, think about something else because it's really not going to benefit you if it's your starter house. Now, see, I've been in this garden for 27 years and I change things all the time, but I think I'm done now because I have a little place at the beach that I like going every other weekend. I still, work as a writer and as a garden conservation maintenance person for a private garden in Raleigh. And so I'm never going to give that up because I love it so much. But I also want to be able to be away from my garden and let it kind of take care of itself. Now, having said that, a garden is never going to take care of itself, but you can take breaks from it.
Very true. And so when you're looking at that garden in 5 or 10 years, is it mostly now a game of editing and action?
Well, it's interesting because, like the Garden Conservancy, when we chose tours, they wanted the garden to be at least 5 years old. And that makes sense, you know. They didn't want someone submitting a garden that had a fabulous design. It really does look great, but it's not mature. You can't really, I was going to say, you can't really buy maturity, but you kind of can if you get pots that are big enough. It's just important for what you want. If you're going to be in a garden for 5 years and you have no trees, maybe you would plant a tree for the next generation. But then you would want to put in a perennial garden or a mixed border. Mixed border is really, for our climates, it's really a good thing because you don't want to look at a pile of mulch off your back porch where you had a perennial garden. I did that for years, and so I've been slowly grooming it to be a mixed border, and I'm very, very happy with it.
And Helen, I'm going to ask you to do a couple confessions here.
Uh-oh.
And see if you're guilty of these too. So do you ever go to a garden center and you fall in love with the plant, not knowing where you're going to plant it when you bring it home?
Okay. Am I a gardener? Yes. Would I do that? Yes. It's what we do.
Mm-hmm. So you're not starting off with a drawing, a sketch, a plan that says ABC goes here, 1, 2, 3 goes here. You're letting yourself deviate from that plan.
Yes, but like I said, at least in my case, I have a water-wise design, so we'll look at a plant and say, you know what, it doesn't require water. Can it go in my xeric? But it wants shade. Do I have enough shade there? So I am able to narrow it down a little bit. So I'm not quite as bad as I used to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we go all through that maturity phase as a gardener that we want it all. And then we start realizing, oh, we can't fit it all. We have to start making some value judgments on that.
Right.
But is there one plant that you collect that you can't resist getting more of?
Yeah, I would say anything in the Rudbeckia family.
Mm-hmm.
I like them. And like I said, it's because it's just as important to me to see a happy color like that and then see the goldfinch eating the seeds.
Have you been trialing some of the new Rudbeckias, and are there any that you particularly like?
I kind of have, and can't say that any have really wowed me right lately. So no, I'm not a testimonial yet, but I'll keep trying.
Yeah. And how about those Rudbeckias that are kind of filled in, not too much of the black part of the black-eyed Susan showing?
Yeah, well, that's taken the place of the seed, and so I don't do double flowers in my garden. And I have a really bad rabbit problem too. And I actually wrote a piece for one of our local magazines called A War on Rabbit, Goodbye Rudbeckia, because they love Rudbeckia. But then I miss the color. And they would eat echinacea as well, my coneflowers. And so I stopped planting them and I said, no. And even as a stylist and somebody who really is passionate about the style of a garden, I said, what's more important to me? Having that plant or not having that plant. The only way I can have it is if I cage it. So I have little cylindrical cages. I did use black wire, chicken wire, so it recedes. It's not as blatant as it would be if it was just silver.
Mm-hmm. And in the book, you do have a chapter about pest control and dealing with deer and rabbits because they want the same things we want often.
Often. true.
And so as a garden stylist, is there something you have a pet peeve of when you go to somebody's garden and you're like, why do they do this?
Well, the water feature is definitely high on that list. Now I got you looking every time you see one. That's probably something that I do, is planting a plant in the wrong place. We inherited a southern magnolia when we moved here 27 years ago. It's on the south side. I kind of liked it, but it grew to 140 feet and it's 15 feet off the house. So we just recently took it down. It was a great plant in a wrong place. And it's really hard to site a giant magnolia like that. It is. You just need a lot of room. But they're pretty in the right place. But anyway, that opened up sun for me, so I was able to put in some raised beds, and I'm enjoying the extra sun. I guess maybe just too many garden ornaments or garden art, like, was it the Garden Riders last year that we went? There was this one garden. She had a great garden. She had so many silhouettes of a rusted metal, silhouettes. But you couldn't even really focus on the garden because there was, just wasn't. She had the space to put it all out, but she clustered it, and it just took away the heart of the garden.
Yeah, I think I remember what garden you were talking about from that tour. But yeah, I would say a lot of elements more than plants.
Yes.
Yeah, that might be the big sin there.
Yeah.
And so wrapping up, what advice would you give a beginning gardener or homeowner when they are first purchasing a house to look for in the garden? So they have a choice of houses, and one might be on a hill, one might be level, one might have a lot of shade, one might have a lot of sun. What one would you go for? What do you look for when you're buying a new property?
Well, I think it's the sun's aspect. It depends, again, what your intention is. So I'm working on a story now where she's always had her vegetable garden in the back, but they just bought a new lot 3 years ago, and they put the vegetable garden in the front. And there is a trend going towards that, but she really had to be convinced to do it. But she liked the lot, and she made that compromise. I wish I wasn't facing west. So I'm my back garden, the east comes up, and then that brutal sun. And I really would have liked something different, but I was able to, mitigate any problems with it, and particularly heated sun, by planting trees in the right place. And every lot has its benefits, and anyone that doesn't really fit your formula, you can do a workaround. There are so many wonderful plants that you can just do a workaround for. And don't plant invasives, whatever you do. I'm a stickler for invasives.
And I would say that's a great point about, usually have four sides to the lot, but is the predominance, south facing? And what do you want to plant there? A vegetable garden, a shade garden, so you can make those choices for yourself.
Yeah.
So how can our listeners contact you and find out more?
Well, you can come friend me on Helen Yost, YOEST. And I also started a new page, and I would love to have a lot of likes on it. And that is called Helen Yost. I'm trying to think. It's so new, I can't even remember it. It's Helen Yost, Garden Maintenance and Author, I think.
And that's on Facebook?
I'm mostly on Facebook.
Okay, so we'll include a link to that in the show notes and your new page there. And final thoughts, Helen, on garden design and style and planting.
I guess I want to encourage people not to get overwhelmed if you're new to gardening, and it can be overwhelming. Pick a small spot and start with it. Experiment, grow from there. Don't chop up your whole lawn into beds and figure out, what's going to go in later. It's got to remember the budget. It's not cost effective. You can really help one bed at a time, and then grow your garden from there.
Great advice. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Kathy.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
In the book The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Terry Spate, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the ingenious ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org.
Mandevilla plant profile. Mandevilla species, is an ornamental vine with trumpet-shaped flowers and glossy green foliage. The blooms come in colors ranging from white to pink to red, as well as apricot and yellow versions. Mandevilla is native to Central and South America and is grown as an annual vine in our region. It is hardy to USDA zones 10 and 11. It blooms all summer long until a hard frost kills it off. It prefers full sun and well-draining soils. Plant them at the base of a trellis and they will grab on and twine around it quickly. Apply a general-purpose fertilizer to encourage flowering. Mandevilla vines can grow up to 15 to 20 feet high. Hummingbirds love to visit its flowers, as do bees and butterflies. It is also fairly deer-resistant due to the milky sap it exudes when cut. It is a good addition to a tropical-themed garden and as a thriller climbing up a support in container plantings. You may see the name Diplodenia, which is a close relative of Mandevilla that is a shrubbier and more compact plant that grows well in planters or in hanging baskets. There are also hybrids of Diplodenia and Mandevilla available. Mandevilla, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, we held our annual tomato taste at the Silver Spring Farmers Market, and it was a real battle between Sun Sugar and Sun Gold, and spoiler alert, Sun Gold came out on top. Several other delicious tomato varieties were entered, and there were favorites amongst all the voters, but again, Sun Gold was the champion. And speaking of champions, we did win some ribbons last week at the Montgomery County Fair, but no first places for us. 1 second place, several thirds, fourths, and fifths, 10 ribbons in all, and we're super happy with those results, especially in a drought year. The August issue of Washington Gardener magazine is out, and the cover story is on Angel's Trumpet versus Devil's Trumpet. That's Brugmansia versus Datura, and knowing the differences between the two. Heirloom Asiatic Garlic is our edible column. Joe Pieweed is the focus of our native plant column, and Morning Glory is the focus of our weed watch, and much more in that issue. You can check that out at washingtongardener.blogspot.com. And in our garden tips this last week, we shared tips for growing figs, including the best varieties for our region, which includes Celeste, Brown Turkey, and a few others, and then some tips on how to nurture those figs to get plenty of fruit, including not to plant anything within that surface root zone because figs do not like any root competition. And in local gardening events, a few upcoming ones you might want to attend if you're in the Washington, D.C. area include Under the Arbor at the U.S. National Arboretum, specializing focus on lemon herbs for Saturday, September 14th, 1 to 4 p.m. This is learning about lemon herbs from the South Jersey unit of the Herb Society of America. The event is free, informal, drop-in event open to the public in the National Herb Garden space at the National Arboretum in Washington, D.C. And then Garden Discovery Day is coming up on September 21st from 9 to 4 p.m. at the Montgomery County Fairgrounds in Gaithersburg, Maryland. This is a program for children and youth from kindergarten through high school. There is a small charge to attend to cover the cost of materials and program expenses, and spaces are limited, so you'll want to register early via the eventbrite.com website. This is hosted by the Montgomery County Master Gardeners and includes lots of tips on growing plants and introducing kids to the love of gardening. Happy gardening.
This is Christy Page with Green Prints, with the last word on love, land, and wisteria, A Gardener's Tale by Ginger Webb. All right, I'll confess, when I should be out in the garden battling my perennial nemesis, the wisteria from hell, I often find myself lost in the depths of my computer screen. Picture this, a serene summer afternoon, the sun gently kissing the earth, and there I am, engrossed in a digital world of online dating. But have no fear, it's not the kind of dating you might think. Let me continue to set the scene. We bought this house with promises of a low-maintenance garden. Little did we know, the wisteria lurking near the trunk had its own agenda. It blooms for a mere 2 weeks, then spends the rest of the year sending out sneaky runners that throttle everything in sight. My friend and I spent one delightful afternoon battling this floral fiend, but it seems the wisteria always has the last laugh. Now, I love my land, truly. It's a slice of heaven nestled in the Boston suburbs, complete with granite outcroppings and mini woodland gardens. But alas, the wisteria's grip knows no bounds, so I find solace in the digital embrace of online dating. No, not for human companionship, but for the love of land. These online listings are like tantalizing glimpses into potential relationships. Picturesque mountain views, manicured gardens, and quaint orchards beckon me with promises of a new love affair. I daydream about driving up country lanes, admiring flower beds, and gazing at dramatic vistas from stone patios. But, like any seasoned dater, I know appearances can be deceiving. These websites only offer a curated glimpse, omitting the gritty details of property ownership. Who knows if there's a woodchuck army lurking in the shadows or an apple orchard in dire need of attention. Despite my digital dalliances, I always come back to reality. I cherish the land I currently call home, despite its wisteria-induced woes. And just like any enduring relationship, it requires time and effort. So I hang up my virtual romance, don my gardening gloves, ready to tackle the wisteria once more.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. You can become a listener supporter for as little as 99 cents a month by going to the supporter link in our show notes or directly to podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/GardenDC/support. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on social media at WDC Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, and Pinterest, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Please take a minute to share us on social media with hashtag GardenDC so other gardeners can find us too.